Hello my book nerdies and welcome to another video. This one is gonna be epic. It's gonna be a challenge for me. In this video, I'm gonna talk about every single one of these 99 books. I read 99 books in 2025 because I was one book away from a freaking 100. You've got to be kidding me. And I'm going to do it giving myself no more than 90 seconds per book. Okay, I'm going to try to get to the point. I will not be ranking these books. I will not be telling you what ratings I gave them. So grab yourself a drink, sit down, get in your cozy blanket, and let's talk books. I have these books piled up everywhere. You guys should see it. It is like the Mount Everest of books over here. So I started out January wanting to finish a series I started, which was the Throne of Glass series. I had read a few of the books already in 2024. So I started 2025 with Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. Then I read Sarah J. Maas' Tower of Dawn, and I read Sarah J. Maas's King of Ash. This series have basically a girl, she's an assassin who had a lot of traumatic events happen to her, and so she kind of ends up with the leader of these assassins, and he teaches her how to fight, basically kill people. So then she's wanted by the entire kingdom and she's pissed a lot of people off. Well, she gets caught, ends up going to prison. While she's in prison, she gets taken out by the prince of this kingdom and his guard. She's basically told, if you fight in our games, you become our champion, you can win right hand of the king and basically be his like right hand guard, and then basically earn your right to freedom back. Well, as close as she can get to freedom. She accepts, and then she ends up in the kingdom in all of this intrigue and this world. But at the same time, there's these mysteries that she's trying to solve, being tasked to do this other stuff. And of course, this kingdom's kind of at war, and her kingdom had been destroyed. She's like the only one left of her kingdom. So, and then with Tower of Dawn, this actually follows a different character altogether. You follow Cole, and I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. Next, I shouldn't say I started ACOTAR. I decided to finish ACOTAR. So I read, oh my goodness, so much hair. The Price of Fuzzy Animals. So anyways, I read A Court of Wings and Ruin. I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. I read A Court of Silver Flames. And this series, the ACOTAR series, if you guys haven't heard of the ACOTAR series, I could say where have you been, but seeing as how this is kind of an older series and I just finished it at the beginning of 2025, I have no room to talk whatsoever. You got Feyre. It starts out with her in the forest and she's hunting for food for her family because they're poor. Their mother's dead. It's just her father and her two sisters and her, and she's trying to take care of them. So she's out hunting and she manages to kill something, but come to find out it wasn't an animal that she killed. It was a fae that was shapeshift as an animal. So this beast comes and he finds her and he takes her to his kingdom. He suddenly starts to think that maybe, just maybe, she is the answer to the fae's problem. They're all under a curse. He thinks that she might be the one that's going to save them all, and that's kind of how the story ensues, and a whole plethora of things happen along the way. And then you have this little novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and this one is just kind of like after all of the events that have happened in the books and things like that. You kind of just get to see the characters all together. And then you have The Court of Silver Flames, which is actually about Feyre's sister Nesta. Protecting What's Mine by Lucy Score. This one, you've got a firefighter and you've got a helicopter rescue person who's she's tired and she really doesn't want to do this full time, so she kind of goes down to just doing that part time, and she becomes a nurse in a small little town where everybody knows everybody's business. It kind of gave me Heart of Dixie vibes, to be honest. The firefighter ends up being her neighbor, and this was kind of this whole he falls first thing. Like the minute he saw her, it was like angels started singing and the world faded away and it just zeroed in on her, and like, you know, he like instantly knew, like, yeah, that's her, that's my woman. But then she's hesitant because he's kind of got a player sort of reputation. She also doesn't know where she's gonna be. Like, she doesn't see this being a forever place. It was just a place for her to relax for a little bit and kind of rest her weary soul. We have the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this is the Crown of Gilded Bones. And then I read The War of Two Queens, and I also read A Soul of Ash and Blood. But basically you have this girl and she's a maiden, and she's always had to keep her face covered. She's not allowed to talk to people. People aren't allowed to see her. She's just a figure, right? And she's eventually supposed to be getting sacrificed for the greater good of the gods and the country, and apparently maidens throughout the centuries have had this done. She goes to this tavern and ends up meeting this guy and almost having a one-night stand with him. Other events happen and it never comes to fruition. And then later she meets him again. His name's Hawks. He ends up being one of her guards. So there's two guards that follow her wherever she goes to protect her, and he ends up being one of them. And then all of these events happen, and there's a war with another country that's being led by this ruthless guy. A rebellion happens, and like this battle happens, and like it's just all crazy adventures. She goes on this epic journey. And then this book, Soul of Ash and Blood, is not the last book. There's another book out, but this one kind of took a step back from the overall series, and it kind of did a replay of book one, only from the perspective of Hawks. This is the mail order cowboy. So this is all about a small town doctor and a woman who is a widow. She lost her husband, and so she's raising her daughter by herself and trying to run a business. And then you have him who absolutely, that loves her. Again, it's another he falls first, and they have history that kind of makes her not really want to like him, but at the same time he comes around and he's been helping her, and slowly her opinions of him thaw, and she realizes that she didn't know him at all. The House of Sky and Breath and House of Earth and Blood, the House of Flame and Shadows, which is the third book and the final book in the Crescent City series. So basically you have this whole system, and this girl who's a human, she loses her best friend, and so she goes on this kind of like investigative track trying to figure out what happened to her friend, happened to her best friend, and then she gets the help of kind of like a fallen angel, and they end up working together, and the romance ensues between the two of them, and it's just this big epic journey of things that happen between like all the books. Like they go through their different trials. I read A Crown of Ivy and Glass, another book that had been on my shelf for quite a while. This was all about a girl named Gemma who she has an illness. Like, everybody has these powers, this magic, and instead of her having magic and having power, she has a sickness that is slowly eating away at her, and she suffers from a lot of pain, and she spent a lot of time in her room growing up because she couldn't handle the day-to-day living without suffering from pain. There's her family and another family are constantly warring with each other, so she tasks the help of a guy that she meets in a party to help her take down this family that is against her family. And in the process, she will teach him all of the nuances of being a gentleman in high society and things like that, because he's from another country and he doesn't really know the way things are supposed to be. So they strike a bargain together. So they end up working together to destroy this family. I read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame and Onyx Storm back to back. Everybody knows Violet and Xaden by this point. I mean, honestly, but So you got this girl, Violet, who basically comes from both her mother and her sister are these dragon rider warriors that are like kick-ass, badass. And then her dad was kind of a scholar. And then you got her who's kind of following in her father's footsteps as being a scholar. She's very weak and kind of sickly. She was sick a lot as a child, so she's not very strong. But her mother ends up forcing her to go through the trials to become a dragon rider. She basically stated no child of hers not going to be a dragon rider. Like, she had no choice but to go. Her mom forced it. And going into this academy to become a dragon rider, she has all these trials. And to top it all off, you've got Xaden, who is against her family. Basically, their parents they rebelled against the country, and they were punished for it, and they were killed, and the children were marked, sent to the academy to become dragon riders. Like, they had to, right? They had no choice. And so to say that Xaden hates her Violet's mother is an understatement. And so, of course, there is the whole enemies to lovers scenario right there, because, you know, Xaden gets attracted to Violet, but yet at the same time, Violet is everything that he hates. Then I read Emily Henry. Funny story. And you guys, this was a funny story. You have this girl who was engaged to a guy, and then you have the main character guy who was dating another girl, and then his girl and her fiance break up with the MMC and the FMC, and they end up getting together. With her having no place to go, the guy, who's also brokenhearted, offers her a room in his apartment where she stays, and they're just quite the pair. One day, they just get this ingenious idea. Why don't we pretend to be dating each other to make their exes jealous and maybe even win them back? And then I like this part down here. It says, but it's all just for show, of course, because there's no way Daphne would actually start her new chapter by falling in love with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, right? I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. And then I read Reckless, Fearless. You have these people who have powers in this world, and then you have those who have no magic. There was this plague that infected the land. People started losing their magic, and then people were born without magic. And so you have this king that believes that the powerless are a plague on the land, and that if he doesn't eradicate them, then the plague will come back. And so he tasks people to basically hunt down the powerless and kill them. And then that's where our main character girl comes in. She is powerless, and she was raised by a man who kind of trained her to fight and trained her to hide by pretending like she has powers. So she's very observant. Think kind of like the Mentalist, right? Like, he's not really a psychic. He's just trained so well at his surroundings, what he can see. Like, he can basically tell a person and who they are just by their surroundings, right? Like, so she kind of does this, was taught the same thing. So she's been able to get by all of these years by pretending to have a psychic ability, a psychic power that she doesn't actually have. And then she ends up saving a prince, which then gets her put into these games. Okay, kind of think, I don't know, Hunger Games in a way, right? That's the vibe I kind of got. Now, these are not like in the sense of Hunger Games that only one can survive, like more than one can survive. Also, you have the prince that she had rescued, who's also in the trials. So they kind of get together in some of these trials, and they help each other, and it's the whole romance that ensues between these guys. Beneath the Stars, which is the Sugar Lake series. This is book 1, and this is by Emily McIntyre. You have this girl who falls in love with this guy at a very young age. She has to watch him date other people and secretly care about him. And then they end up getting together. But because he's so broken, he doesn't feel worthy of love. Some things happen, and he wasn't there for her when he should have been. And so she basically says, screw you, goodbye. And then many years go by, and then they end up seeing each other again. He ends up coming back to Sugar Lake to help take over his dad's business. They keep running into each other. He ends up being a contractor who is helping rebuild the store that she works at, and so she has to run into him a lot. And this is all about learning to forgive each other, learning to see past your traumas and the things that you've been through. Sunrise on the Reaping, yes, by Suzanne Collins. I love the Hunger Games. Always loved Haymitch. Haymitch has always had a special place in my heart. And so reading his story and getting to actually see and feel everything that this guy has been through just tore me up. Like, I was bawling And at the same time, it just brings more of an understanding to Haymitch. Like, you can kind of guess, like, because you know that he's a survivor of the Hunger Games, right? So you know, obviously, what he had to do in order to survive, in order to be there to help Katniss and Peeta in their Hunger Games, right? So you have to kind of know, but that barely scratches the surface of exactly what this guy went through. I understand why he is the way he is. I also understand now why he worked with Peeta and Katniss the way that he did. I mean, it shares so much information. Ruthless Creatures and Carnal Urges. Now, I haven't finished the series. These are so far the only 2 books that I have read. There are more books in the series, and I do plan on continuing the series, but these are like interconnected stories, so they're each about their own individual characters. So in this one, you have Natalie, and her fiance disappeared right before she was going to get married, and she doesn't know what happened to him. People think that he died. So for 5 years, she lives in this almost like insanity, not being able to find closure. And she's tried dating and things like that, but it's never worked out. And then along comes Cage, who is tasked to actually kill her. And instead, he lets her live. Basically, he falls for her. Like, he falls in love with her immediately. He can't get enough of her. And so she kind of becomes his little secret. And they have this, like, secret relationship. But then, lo and behold, she learns was sent to collect an unpaid debt from her fiance. All of these things ensue. And she learns that her fiance wasn't who she thought he was. So then, you go into this one, which is about Natalie's best friend, and Cage is mortal enemy, Declan. Sloane, she is quirky, okay? She's someone who also kind of had a bit of a rough life, wasn't accepted for who she was and how she was, and so she became this happy person, determined to be a happy person. She does yoga, she lives healthy, she is constantly happy, she's bubbly. Declan comes in and kidnaps her, takes her away, and she's just like, she's held prisoner, and yet she's happy, and nobody knows what to do with her. And she kept telling Declan, who ends up being the leader of this mob, she's like, oh, you're gonna fall in love with me, it's gonna happen, everybody does, like, it's okay, just accept it. And he's just like, you were a prisoner, what? Came Quicksilver in November of 2025. It came out. This is Brimstone, book 2. So you can bet I read that when it came out. So Quicksilver book 1, Brimstone book 2. So basically you have this girl, Fane, who has this secret ability. She has the ability to manipulate Quicksilver. And all of these events happen. She gets captured. She ends up opening this Quicksilver portal, and a guy comes through named Kingfisher, and then he ends up taking her to his realm, and then having to heal her because she had gotten hurt. And so he ended up healing her, and she finds out that she was called an alchemist, and the only one of her kind. There used to be lots of them, but they're all gone. She's all that's left. King tasks her to basically take over, work for him, find a way to open all of the Quicksilver portals. But Kingfisher has a whole other idea for her because they're also fighting a war of like undead vampire-y zombie type things. The only way to really kill them is with Quicksilver weapons. Tells her that if she helps him, then like make Quicksilver weapons, that he'll let her go back to her own realm where she can be with her brother. And something really big happens at the end involving Kingfisher, and I'm going, oh, no way. And now, like, everything that I've read involving Kingfisher from book 1 and book 2 are suddenly starting to click, and I'm going, why didn't I notice this before? Duh! I read book 1, which is Wild Love, and book 2, which are Wild Eyes. This is not the completion of the series. There are more books, the same world, but they're each their own little standalone stories about different couples. In book 1, you have Ford Grant and Rosie. Rosie and Ford have kind of known each other since they were kids. Ford and her brother are best friends. And so she always kind of saw him as off limits because of that fact. And he always saw her as off limits because she was his best friend's little sister. But Ford had always loved her, that he's going to move there. He's going to open his own recording studio. And Rosie, who had left the big city, some things happen, some pretty horrible things happen. And she ends up coming back home and staying in her brother's little barn area, then ends up going to work with Ford and kind of being like his secretary and stuff. And so they're kind of in close quarters a lot. And so the sparks fly. And then of course you got Ford, who finds out that he's got a daughter who, like, from a donor, like he donated sperm. Okay. And so this girl who's like 13 tracks him down needing his help. And so he ends up helping her and keeping her with him. So he's learning all of the ropes of being a single dad with a 13-year-old daughter. And so Rosie kind of helps with that, and they kind of become their own little knit family. And then Rosie and his daughter, they share their own bond. And then of course, Ford's daughter also loves music, so they get to do some things there. For Wild Eyes, you have Rosie's brother Weston. This is his story, and he's kind of been a playboy, and so he's been all over the place, and he's had a bit of a wild streak, bailed out of jail a few times. And then you have Skylar, who is a country singer, and she comes to Rose Hill to work in Ford's recording studio. She wants to create her own album, something that's separate from her family, who are very controlling. They've been controlling her life since she was little, and she's always just wanted a life of her own. She ends up staying at Weston's place in that little shack that Rosie used to stay in. The romance ensues from there, and Weston, he's always been a super fan of Skylar's. He's even got like shirts of hers and stuff. And so him trying to not fanboy on her because he knows that she's skittish and he kind of wants to help her. And how these two met in the beginning is something, it was hilarious. Not something that I've really experienced in books before. Having lived in the country of both Wyoming and Montana, I totally get where he's coming from. Like, seriously, people, why are you doing what you're doing? Like, obviously you've never been in the country before. The Blood of Fae series. This is book 1, Queen of Roses. Book 2, which is Court of Claws. Book 3, which is Empress of Fae, and book 4, which is Night of the Goddess. So you've got the main character girl whose name is Morgan Pendragon. She's rumored to carry the tainted blood of the Fae in her veins. And so because of that, her birthright is stolen from her, and her brother, King Arthur, ends up taking the throne instead. And she is set to join the church. That's how they want her to serve. Again, kind of reminds me of From Blood and Ash. Like, her life's not her own. She's gonna have to serve. That's what she's gonna have to do. But before she signs herself to the church, her brother comes at her with a quest. He wants her to go find Excalibur. Gives her some people that she is supposed to go with. One of them is a guard that she just met, and they were kind of like butting heads. She wasn't really a fan of his. And so she goes on this whole journey to find Excalibur, to bring Excalibur back to her brother. And so that's kind of where it all starts, and then it just goes on from there. I really don't want to share anything that happens in the other 3 books because that would give it away if nobody has read this series. Oh man, I've been talking so much, I really needed a drink. Read the 2 books out of the Maple Hill series. We have Icebreaker and we have Wildfire. And again, same world, same kind of college, but kind of different. In this one, you have an ice skater and a hockey player who kind of come together. He helps her, she helps him. And so it's just their whole romance, and he ends up having to step in a little bit and help her. And it kind of reminds me of a movie, I can't remember the name of it. Every single time that the hockey player would fall over with his ice skate, she'd be like, toe pick. Just a really cute story, and with them in college and how they fell in love. And he's just a very sweet, bubbly person. She is, she's got a lot on her plate, and she's very like, I have to make lists or I'm going to have an anxiety attack. And so he kind of helps her, but at the same time, he's also very supportive of her, and he's so sweet. And like, if there's any guy who can see who you are on the inside and love and support you for that, it's him. And then in Wildfire, you have a guy who's on the same hockey team as the guy in book 1. He has a one-night stand with a girl, and then she moves on. She had been dating someone from was it the soccer team or the basketball team? I can't remember if it was soccer or basketball. I want to think it was basketball. She'd been dating somebody from like the basketball team, and they broke up. And so she has a one-night stand with this guy, and then she moves on, and then she just leaves. There's like this whole miscommunication afterwards, and so she just leaves. And he thinks that she left, and she thinks that he didn't like her, you know, like, yeah, it was this whole thing. And so she ends up going to a camp, going to a summer camp that she used to go to a lot as a kid, that made her feel, you know, loved and special, because her family didn't make her feel that way. He ends up working at that same camp, and so sparks fly between the two of them. But however, they're campers, and so there's a strict no fraternization policy, and so you've got this whole romance brewing in the secret corners where they're trying to not get caught, because he needs this job and she needs to stay at camp because it's her safe, happy place. Both have their things that they're trying to get through, that they're trying to deal with, but also at the same time wanting to be together with each other. And it's just, again, all about that. You know, just love can conquer all if you just have the brave of heart to open yourself up and allow for it. Night of the Witch. This is book 1. This book is all about a witch girl whose entire family her entire village gets killed off, right? Like, this is like a witch hunter's type tailing. They get all killed off, and she's all that's left, and she's basically out for vengeance against the guy who's the leader, she happens to know. You've got this guy who's like a general, and he has been doing everything in his power to kind of protect the witches as much as he can, and he has this whole plot set up to rescue a bunch of the witches that are being imprisoned, for like a mass execution. All these things go awry, and she ends up getting in the way, and so instead of getting the help of someone else that he was gonna get help from, that had planned this all with him, she ends up stepping in to help him instead. But we have Zodiac Academy, book 2, which is Ruthless Fae, book 3, that's the Shadow Princess, and book 3, which is The Reckoning, and book 4, which is Shadow Princess. And boy, did this one leave on a cliffhanger. We've got twin girls. There's Darcy and Tori, and they were living in the human realm as orphans. Come to find out, they aren't humans after all, they are fae, and so they get taken to the academy where they're orphans still. They are set to inherit all this money. They just have to finish going to Zodiac Academy first. And then you have these 4 guys, they're called the heirs, and they're just horrible to the girls because, like, they don't want the girls to take the throne. Their families have been share ruling the Fae Kingdom since the girls' parents had died, and they're afraid that the girls are going to take the throne, and they don't want that. The girls don't want it either, though. They know nothing about the Fae. They know nothing about the realm. They know nothing about how things operate. They were humans, right? They just want their inheritance. They just want to graduate, finish Zodiac Academy so that they can get their inheritance money and be able to survive, because they weren't surviving very well as orphans by themselves. Tori was stealing vehicles and things like that, and Darcy was trying to be helpful in her own way. I read the entire Blue Moon series by Lucy Score. So you have book 1, which is No More Secrets, book 2, which is Fall into Temptation, book 3, The Last Second Chance, book 4, Not Part of the Plan, 5, Holding On to Chaos, 6, The Fine Art of Faking It, and 7, which is The Mistletoe Kisser. This is another one of those standalone series. It's set in the same world but different people. And so these 3 books are about the brothers. So you have Carter, and then you have Beckett, and then you have Jackson. And these are the Pierce brothers. Each one of them have their own individual stories, and where they meet their girls and fall in love, and how that kind of all ensues. And then you have Not Part of the Plan, which is about Nikolai, which is the main character girl, Summer, her and Carter. He's her best friend, and so he comes to Blue Moon, where he meets Emma, which is
Gia from book 2. So Gia and Emma are sisters. And so Emma moves to Blue Moon to be with her sister and to help out and so then that's her and Nikolai's story. And then you have Holding It On to Chaos, which is Eva, which is the sister to Emma and Gia. And she falls in love with the sheriff, who of course you meet in book 1, and you see him throughout, like, you know, most of the books. And that's Cordona, Sheriff Cordona. If you're looking for a hero to come rescue you on a white horse, that's Cordona in a nutshell. The fine art of making it. You kind of meet the girl Eden in this book. You kind of meet her in Holding On to Chaos. She kind of becomes friends with Eva, but you don't really see her a lot. She's not a huge deal. You just kind of hear about her a little bit, and you hear nothing about the main character Guy in this book, which is Davis Gates. But apparently he had been friends with the Pierce brothers in high school, and then he left and was gone for a really long time, and then suddenly comes back. And Eden and Davis, their families hate each other, so it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing. And then, of course, you've got the Mistletoe Kisser. This has Sammy Ames. She's the veterinarian of Blue Moon. So you kind of meet Sammy in Jackson Pierce's story, book 3, because his girl Joey runs like the horse aspect to the Pierce farm, and so she trains and raises horses there. And so you meet Sammy because with her being the veterinarian, right, she looks after the horses and stuff. So you kind of met her a little bit. But this Ryan Sosa had never met him before. He's like he'd never been to Blue Moon until this book, and he's like wow, everybody around here is crazy. And so they think he's somebody that he's not, and it's just, oh man, they're all really good books. And honestly, I absolutely love the quirky people in this town. There's what's called the Beautification Bureau, and they have this like 100% success rate on getting people together. The things that they do to try to beat Cupid is just borderline insanity. That's all I'm saying. If you want a good laugh with lots of romance and steam and just, oh man, this book has everything in it. The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. And then you have The Reluctant Queen, which is book 2. And then book 3 is The Queen of Sorrow. And this was an interesting series. Like, you'd think it would be about one person, but it's not. So book 1 is about Delina. In this world, it's set where you have all of these little sprites. And there's like the earth sprites, there's fire sprites, there's water sprites. They're all controlled by one human queen. And it's her job to control these sprites. And if she doesn't, they will start killing humans because they don't like the humans. The humans are destroying the world. They're destroying the forests, and they don't want that. So this queen has to control them so that her people won't die. And the people also don't live in buildings and in houses and stuff. They live in the trees. Like, they have like tree villages. When Delina is little, the sprites somehow break control from the queen, and they end up destroying her entire village, and only her family survives. Everybody else in that village were killed. So she grows up and learned that she has a little bit of power to control the sprites, which is actually normal. There are women, what they do is they go off to this school and they train so that if by any point the queen should die, we'll meet in the field and the sprites will pick a new queen. Only a certain select get the opportunity to be chosen. Then you've got the main character Guy, who him and his like group of soldiers appear in this town to try to help, but by then the villager's already gone. So then, but that's where he first meets the Delina, and that's Ven. Ven is that main character. Now, Delina and Ven are not, there's no romance between them. Ven is like probably the same age as me, and Delina, by the time she starts becoming trained by him, is like 17, 18. So there's a huge age gap, like father-daughter type relationship, I would almost say, but like he trains her. And so I would say more like teacher-student. And then in book 2, which is The Reluctant Queen, we meet another main character. Ven actually ends up training another, and she is actually more his age. She ends up divorcing from her husband. She has a couple kids. She doesn't want to leave, but she's one of the most powerful remnants that Ven has seen in a very, very long time. And she's exactly what the kingdom needs. Then in book 3, it's kind of about all of them. Hellbent. Now, this one was interesting because it ended up being book 2 and not book 1. And I didn't even know it was part of a series. Like, it doesn't really say anywhere in here, not like until I looked on the inside. And then I was like, oops. You got this guy who's been working for a bad demon for a while, and he's been taught that like humans are bad. And he's basically the hunter. When his mistress him to go find somebody to bring them back to her, that's kind of his job to do. And then he gets tasked to go find these like 4 prince demons that have rebelled against hell itself. When he goes there, instead of bringing them right back, he actually befriends them, and he wants to know what it's like to live in the human world. So they teach him to disguise himself so that he doesn't look like a demon. That's where he meets a girl who has some magic in her. Their story ensues together, and it's his story of how he breaks the chains from his mistress and how she helps him free himself and how they start a life together. This is Flawless. This is book 1, and I believe, is this the... Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is book 1 in the Chestnut Spring series. We're talking real cowboys here, guys. This guy is a bull rider, okay? And his life is kind of... He got himself in a bit of a mess. So his agent sends his daughter over to help him with his image to get back on the right path. His family doesn't really understand why he wants to be a bull rider. They're worried, he's getting older, and they're worried about him getting hurt and never coming back home. And then he feels like they've never really supported him, and he's been angry. She kind of helps him see that there's more to life than just bull riding. They fall for each other, and it was a really sweet story. And then we have the Gods and Monsters series. You have Darien Castle, which I absolutely love Darien, and he's like the leader of the House of Devils. So you have these groups of magic users that are all kind of categorized in their own little category, and then you've got the humans. And so Darien Castle is like the leader of the House of Devils, which is the most powerful, strongest house in the whole city. And then you've got Lauren, who's a human. Darien actually gets tasked to find her. He finds her just to realize that something's not right. He's like, why would people be willing to pay so much money for this human? She's innocent. There's nothing wrong with her. So instead of turning her in, he decides to help her because her friend was kidnapped, and she needs Darien Castle's help to solve this mystery, to find her friend, and to figure out why they want her dead. Like, there's been several attempts on her life in the book, and so they're trying to figure out why this is all happening. And then there's this whole like romantic thing. And then she's just like, well, he's the House of Devils, he's all powerful, I'm a human, I'm a nobody, I would just stand in his way. Emily Henry book, this one is called Book Lovers. So she's a literary agent, and the guy is a book editor, and she's known to be very cutthroat, very aggressive. And so she takes a break. Her sister really wanted to go on a vacation away from her husband and her kids, and so she goes with her sister on a vacation into like the middle of nowhere, and this town is just like crazy. She's like asking her sister how she even found this place, and it just so happens to also be the hometown of the book editor that she has ran across before that she did not like. And so she keeps running into him, and they keep like getting together in circumstances. I had to stop and take a pee break and then readjust some books. My bed's only so big, guys. It's only a queen size bed. Read Deepened. So this is all about a girl who's a diver, and she has an incident and gets hurt on one of her dives. And so she ends up with some trauma, and she can still dive, but she can't do the special dive. And so this is affecting her ability to perform. She gets a therapist to try to help her. And in the meantime, she meets this guy who is a swimmer. He's like the best swimmer on their team. He's like number 1. And so they kind of develop a little bit of a relationship. He ends up kind of helping her in her trauma so that she can dive again. And then this story is just about the two of them and their romance, and it's about overcoming odds. The Knight and the Moth. This book is all about a girl who is in this church with all of these other girls around her age. They have coverings over their eyes so people can't see, like they can't see anything beyond here, like all of this is covered. They have this ability, like people can come and ask questions. They go into this water and they have these visions. So she ends up meeting this guy who's part of the army, part of the guard protecting the king, and they instantly hate each other. However, she ends up needing his help because her sisters, they start going missing. The girl breaks out of this castle and hunts down this guard to help her find her sisters. And along the way, you have this gargoyle ends up following her, and I just love him. And you learn more about his story, and it's so sad and bittersweet. Then I read another Lucy Score book. This is Story of My Life. It's a standalone. The main character, Hazel, she is a book author, and she has this massive breakup that kind of leaves her devastated, and she can't seem to write any more books. And so on a spontaneous whim, she ends up buying this broken down mansion, and that she didn't even realize was really broken down. Like the pictures didn't really show that at all. So she moves into this nothing town. So she tasks one of the guys who's part of a construction company that really needs the money, decides to help. Now he doesn't want to. He's kind of this loner. He just wants to be left alone. He doesn't want to deal with people. Definitely not some city slicker. His family really needs the money. So he ends up working there, and then she kind of ends up using him as inspiration for books. Like suddenly she has this drive to write again, and he's the force behind that. And so she's like, hey, tell you what, how about you go on a couple dates with me and help me get inspiration for my book? Then I read The Dark Desire, which is basically just like a Cinderella retelling. The prince in this book is a guy who really can't feel. He had a really bad thing happen to him when he was young, and he feels nothing. Like he could go into one of those Cairo fridge things, and like he can't feel the cold. That's like how numb he is. And then he meets her, who's a little thief trying to break into his house and steal from him at a party. Things just ensue from there, and she kind of helps thaw his heart, like helps him feel again. And so even though his rich mother doesn't want him marrying a Cinderella, he wants her, and they kind of just fight this attraction for a while. And then he's like, hey, I want you to stick around and help me. And so she's like, okay, I can do that. I can help you. And then they're just romance ensues from there. Then I read Dire Bound. In her village, kids are going missing. So she tries to train them to help them out so that they won't, so that they could fight back from whatever's kidnapping them. And she trains her sister too. However, her sister gets taken. So in order to try to save her sister, she joins the army so that she can go to the front line and hopefully go across the border and rescue her sister, because she's determined to believe that the bad people in this realm that they're fighting are the ones that have taken these children. It just so happens that the year that she enlists in the army is also the same year of the dire wolves. So once every so many years, end up having to go up the mountain and attempt to bond with a dire wolf. And of course she does. She bonds with the dire wolf, but their relationship is very rocky. So instead of getting to go to the front line and hunt for her sister, she's stuck at this like academy setting trying to bond with her dire wolf. Like even though they are bonded, they're really butting heads. So she's trying to get rein on the powers, but also being impatient because she just wants to leave. And but she's also being trained, and so she's there's this whole battle of wills there. And then you've got this general who is also bound to a dire wolf, like this massive evil, like rip the heads off of people dire wolf. And so you got this whole aspect with him as well. And so we'll just have to see how things go. Then I read another Emily Henry book. This is Beach Read. This one was really cute. This girl, she's a romance author, and then she ends up at this beach house trying to get her mojo back. And she just so happens to be next door to Augustus Everett, who is a literary fiction author, and he's also having writer's block. So they're both having writer's block. And so they kind of come together and they're like, hey, you write a literary fiction book and I'll write a romance book. and whoever finishes first has to support the other person's book. And so then she ends up taking him on these romantic adventures to kind of help give him inspiration. And then he ends up taking her to some of his interviews and stuff for his literary fiction so that she can get inspiration for her book. And throughout all of this whole romance ensues between the two of them. The Spell Shop and The Enchanted Greenhouse. This is book 1 and book 2 in a series. So in The Spell Shop, you have this girl. She's a librarian and she's tasked to take care of all of the books in this giant library, just full of knowledge that only the king and his people can get a hold of. Then a rebellion happens and the library ends up catching on fire. So she takes as many books as she can, along with a sentient spider plant, Kaz, who can talk, and they leave and they go to this island far, far away where she used to live when she was little. They go back to her home, which is kind of falling apart, and she decides, well, they're going to live there and they're going to survive. However, they have no money. They're running out of food. So she decides that she's going to use some of the spells in the book to open like a little shop where she will basically sell jams and stuff. And so then you've got this guy who lives on the island and he trains these magical seahorses, comes and he helps her repair like the house and things like that. And all this while she's trying to keep the magic from the books a secret because she doesn't want to get in trouble from the capital. If you go against the capital, punishment is usually being turned like a statue basically, and she doesn't want that to happen. And she knows this because the person who created Kaz was punished for creating Kaz for using the magic in the books and was turned to a statue. And then in The Enchanted Greenhouse, this is about the girl who got turned into a statue who gets unstatuified, finds herself not in the library but on another island, a enchanted greenhouse with all of these rooms, and there's only one guy living on this island still taking care of this entire greenhouse that's kind of falling. The enchantments in the greenhouse are dying. She helps this guy take care of the greenhouse and try to find ways to save this greenhouse and save all the plants on this island. And so like obviously the romance ensues between the two of them. Then I read the Kings of Sin, not the whole series. I got through 3 books. So you have the King of Wrath. Again, these are like billionaire romances, same world, different couples. So in this one, you've got billionaire Dante Russo and Vivian, and they end up in a marriage, like a forced relationship. Her dad is blackmailing him and says, hey, you have to marry my daughter. And so then that way I can have an end to everything. And so then they get engaged. She ends up moving in and living with him while they're engaged. And then, you know, romance ensues, even though he didn't originally like her because her dad is the scum of the earth. But the whole romance ensues between the two of them, and she teaches them all these things, and it's a very sweet book. Book 2, King of Pride. This is about one of Vivian's best friends, Isabella, and Dante's friend Kai. She works as a bartender at this elite, this elite bar. Only the most powerful, most famous, richest people can go to this place. It's called like Valhalla, I think, or something like that. And of course, they have strict rules that you can't fraternize with the patrons, but she ends up seeing Kai secretly, like she can't get away from him. And then he's not supposed to be seeing her. She has no money, and his family, they want him to marry someone rich, someone of his caliber. They start seeing each other and kind of getting the feels for each other in secret. And of course, everything that's secret comes crumbling down. And but yeah, that's like their whole story, their whole dynamic. And King of Greed is the 3rd book, and for this one it's about Dominic and his wife, Alessandra. Alessandra decides to leave him because he's all about money and fame, and that's all that matters to him. Like, they used to have a great relationship until his company took off, and then he never had time for her. He's always off doing something else. He never talks to her. They never hang out. She's lost herself, and she's sad and she's lonely, and he misses their 10th wedding anniversary, and then that's when she's had enough. She's broken, and she decides to leave him and start her life over. However, she wasn't expecting Dominic to be like, no, I'm not letting you go. It's all about him realizing the error of his ways, realizing what he'd done, what really was the most important thing in his life, and fighting to keep that while she's trying to fight to get away. And so it's this whole dynamic, and it's her learning to trust him again, and also realizing that if they are going to get together again, the relationship can never be the same. It's got to be different. I also started reading the Pumpkin Spice Cafe series by Lori Gilmore. So I read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, and the Christmas Tree Farm. You have this girl, Jeannie, who kind of moves to this town and buys her, or like basically takes over her aunt's Pumpkin Spice Cafe, rebuilds it up, opens a business. She has no idea what she's doing. She's never ran a business before, but she's determined to make it work. She's kind of going through like her own little midlife crisis, realizing that she doesn't want to live for nothing anymore. She wants to live for something. And then you've got Logan, who is kind of like the farmer, and he sells goods to people and like pumpkins and things like that. And then he ends up meeting her when he's delivering pumpkins to her cafe. And then he ends up helping her out with little odds and ends. He kind of just gets roped in, and he's like instant attraction to her, and she's instant attraction to him. But he had been in a relationship before where the woman just didn't like Dream Harbor and wanted bigger things, and so ends up breaking his heart and leaving. So he's very shy. Like, she seems to be skittish, like she might not stay even though she owns that cafe now. And so he's kind of hesitant towards her, and she feels that hesitism. And so even though they're both drawn to each other, they're both also kind of like, I don't know. In the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, you have Hazel, who is definitely going through a midlife crisis. She realizes she's getting ready to turn 30, and she's never done anything with her life. Pretty much just stayed, worked in the bookstore, read books, and never lived her life. And so she gets together with Noah, and they kind of go on this adventure. There's these little notes that start appearing in her bookstore. It's like it's leading her to go do different things, and Noah decides to help her with these things. And he's a little bit younger than her, and he's more spontaneous, maybe a little too spontaneous. So you got her who's extra reserved, him who's a little extra spontaneous, and they kind of come together to make this perfect balance. And then there's the Christmas Tree Farm, and this is about Bennett, who is Jeannie's brother, comes to visit for a couple of weeks through Christmas and the New Year. And then he meets Kyra North, who had just happened to buy the Christmas Tree Farm there in Dream Harbor. Had no idea what to do with the Christmas Tree Farm. She was just wanting something different in her life, bought this Christmas Tree Farm, and decided that if people on YouTube can go and live off of the land and grow all their own food and do all these amazing things, well, then she can do it too. She has no idea what she's doing, and Bennett ends up helping her. He's kind of one of those do-gooders who's always out to want to help people, which has kind of led him to be taken advantage of in several instances. So he's just very much like trying to not be that way, and she's more of a rich person who's used to having people do everything for her, and she wants to try to be independent. So she's like, no, I have to do this on my own. And he's like, no, you have to do this on your own, right? But like at the same time, he's also wanting to help her, and she's also wanting his help because she needs his help, and it's just a really cute dynamic. Then I read Escaped from Rage. I got this girl who was married, and her husband ends up being a bad guy, and so she tries to escape to get away from him, and she goes into a whole new city. She changes her name. While she's living this, she realizes that she's never really going to escape him unless she can actually get divorced from him. So she goes to this lawyer, and she says, hey, this guy, he's my husband, I need a divorce. I need to be on my own. And he's like, okay, well, sometimes these can be messy. He's like, I'm going to task some guys to guard you and keep you safe just in case. He starts this process. And then, of course, because of this whole divorce, her husband finds her and he tries to get her back, and people are dying. And she ends up meeting this guy who's friends with the lawyer. He shares this company with his lawyer friend of these people that protect people who need it. So he kind of gets drawn into the scenario and drawn into helping keep her safe while their loyal friend is on vacation. That's where they kind of meet, and a romance ensues between the two of them, all while you've got this heavy cloud of an evil, vindictive, murdering man who seems to be mixed up in with the mob. Also, he's like a district attorney too, so there's that whole aspect too, and that's why it's not so easy to get away from him. Then I read Phantasma, and this book is all about a girl whose mother dies. She inherits her mother's powers, and then her sister goes into what's called Phantasma, which is like this mansion that appears every so often and has these games, and if you can get through all of the trials on all 9 floors, then at the end of it, you get one wish, whatever it is you want. So her sister ends up going in there. So then she ends up following her sister to get her sister out of there by going into the games herself. While she's there, she meets a phantom, And this phantom and her end up with an agreement that if she finds a way to help free him from the mansion, he will help her get through the floors and meet her sister. And so they end up going through all these trials, and then he helps her, and then she helps him, and this whole romance ensues between her and this phantom. A Nora Roberts book, my first and only book of 2025. That was a Nora Roberts book. I'm a huge fan of hers. This one was interesting because this is like the battle of the minds. She's a little girl, and she sees through a murderer's eyes when he kills her parents while her and her brother with her grandma in a different state. And so she ends up helping the police capture this guy and arrest this guy. There's that whole aspect there. And then so she ends up living with her grandma. And then as the years go by, every once in a while she helps the police with other cases. She meets a guy and his son, who just so happens to be a lead singer in a band that she was obsessed with when she was younger. And so it's like getting to meet your hero, right? And of course she loved him then, but at the same time she's kind of hiding herself a little bit because of her abilities, right? Because she can see things, she can touch things and know things, know emotions. And so she has these powers and she doesn't want to scare him away. So she kind of reserves herself off. I mean, and she's been burned in the past by people who found out about her powers, like when she was in college and stuff, and horrible things happen. So she's very reserved. And, and he's got his son to think about, but yet he's fallen for her and she's fallen for him. And he loves her aunt and her brother. And it was just a very family-oriented book. Next we had Terror at the Gates, and this one was about a girl, you've got this like giant city that's sectioned off, and each section has its own leader, and her dad's a leader of one section, but she hates her family, and when she grows up she leaves them to go live on her own for a while, which her father allows because she goes to another section of the city that happens to be run by a guy that she's known since she was little. And her father pretty much told this guy, hey, keep her safe while you're there, let her sow her oats for a little bit before she has to come back and get married, because that's all women were good for in this world, right? They have their religion, and she fights against that, and she doesn't want help, and so she kind of steals things and resells them for money. And she happens, and one of the times that she does this, she gets this blade that just starts killing people, and which just leads down this mysterious journey of things that she's trying to solve, because all of this stuff is happening and she seems to be the center of it, and this blade keeps finding her, and then she's hearing these voices, and it's just this whole mystery. So the MMC is the ruler of this one section of the city, is helping her, and like there's this whole like romance ensuing between the two of them. This was Belladonna. Now Belladonna is about this girl whose family keeps dying. Her mom and dad died when she was a baby, so then she goes and gets put with her grandma, who then her grandma eventually dies, and then she gets put with someone else, and then they die, and it's like death is following her. She can see ghosts, and she's seen death himself several times, so she hates death. She's on a mission to kill death if it's possible, because she feels like he is following her and trying to kill her off. And so then she ends up more of a distant type family. The woman of the house had died of a sickness, and the daughter has the same illness. She learns that it wasn't an actual illness, that the woman had been killed by poison. And it seems to be that whoever poisoned her is also poisoning the daughter. And so she sets out on this mission to try to find who is doing the poisoning so that she can save this girl, and so that the ghost can rest in peace. And all the while, Death is trying to help her solve these mysteries. And there's a stable guy who's also trying to help her solve the mystery of things that happen. Then there was a Falling Like Leaves, and in this one you have this girl who moves to this town where her aunt has been living, and they've been to this town off and on throughout the years to visit for the summer, but her mom and her dad split up. She goes with her mom to this place, even though she doesn't want to go because it puts her whole life plans on hold. Then she meets up with this guy who she had been friends with when they were younger, only to find that he, although recognizes her, seems to hate her. He has deep animosity for her until she realizes why. And so they build their friendship back up, and then it eventually turns into a type of romance, all the while she's trying to figure out what she really wants to do with her life. This is just a story of a girl in high school, her senior year of high school, who has all of these roads and these paths that that she can go down and trying to discover herself and what she wants amidst all the noise around her. Next, you have Shield of Sparrows. Very good book. This one is basically about a princess who really doesn't want to be a princess. Her sister is set to be what's called the Sparrow, where she marries someone from another kingdom to kind of like keep all of the realms in each other's good graces. They have to share their daughters, right? And it's just this kingdom's turn to share their daughter with a rivaling kingdom. But a whole series of events happen, and instead the main character girl here ends up being the Sparrow instead of her sister. And she's just like, oh great, I've never trained to be the Sparrow. I don't have any fighting skills, no political skills, no nothing, right? Like I've done nothing. The prince really wants her, demands that they get married. So she marries him, gets on a ship, heads over to their kingdom, which is way different than her kingdom. All the while, there's this other guy, he's called the Guardian, and he is tasked to help train her to fight and to survive in this wild kingdom. And although they hate each other, there's a lot of sparks between the two of them, but she's also still trying to get to know her husband, who just seems to always be gone. And it's frustrating for her because how can she be married if he's not around? Had stuffed that had nothing to do with Thanksgiving, and it's just like a very small book. And this is just all about a girl who's getting ready to lose her job, and she comes home for Thanksgiving and to spend it with her family, and just to realize that this is where she wants to be. The guy here who was her childhood crush is also going to be at the Thanksgiving dinner, and so she has to put up with him, and then sparks like instantly fly, and it's just spice, and then at the end a quick happily ever after. That's pretty much all that was about. Next you have Kindling, and this girl's girlfriend leaves her, and so she's left on her own, and she's basically told, you have no spirit, you're boring, you don't do anything fun. So she's like, you know what, screw that, I'm gonna take my money, I'm gonna go rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and I'm gonna write a book. And come to find out, she gets there and the cabin is flooded and she has nowhere to go. So she's walking through the woods and happens to find a cabin where this guy is at. And so he offers her a place in his cabin. This is not where he sleeps. It's just like a little workplace. He offers her to stay there. She pays him so that she can write her book. And then like she's also trying to find herself too. And so this whole romance ensues between the two of them. The Pumpkin Spice Meltdown was another one I read. And this one, she quits her job, sells all of her stuff, moves to this town to be with a guy that she's dated, and they're supposed to get married, only for her to land on the tarmac and him to call her on the phone and said, oh yeah, by the way, we can't get married because I'm already married. Bye, click. What? So, I mean, luckily her aunt lives in a nursing home in the town that she's at. So she ends up living on her aunt's couch in the nursing home until she can find a place to live. And so amongst all of this, Thanksgiving is coming, and her parents, who sold their house to go traveling, no longer have a place to do Thanksgiving anymore for their entire family, because it's always been like a big thing where all the families get together. They've tasked different people to be the hosts for the Thanksgiving dinner. She gets to take the first turn, and she had it all planned out, but because of all of this stuff happening, she is suddenly like, crap, what am I going to do? And she doesn't want to give it to her sister-in-law because she'll never hear the end of it. Her and her sister-in-law don't get along. She's determined to throw this party by all means necessary. And in comes the main character guy, who is taking an old casino. He's rebuilding it into a bunch of apartments and stuff. So then to help her out, he basically gets one room, only one room in this entire building completely done so that she can have an apartment of her own. And then he allows her to use the bar downstairs to turn it into a beautiful area for the Thanksgiving dinner for her family. And in the meantime, all of these things are going wrong. And like everything started turning out okay, things were working out, but then destruction. And then it's this whole journey about learning that things don't have to be perfect. Things are the way they are. Enjoy life and just go with the punches. Fall I Want. She was apparently dreaming about him before she met him. And he has a psychic sister who told him, hey, you're having a rough time, go to this place, you're gonna meet the love of your life here. And so he's like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna do it, because like he wants to get out of the limelight. He's been hurt. They end up meeting. It's like sparks instantly fly, recognition automatically flies, but he's like, oh my gosh, no, I've been burned. So he's so mean to her in the beginning. But then suddenly he's not mean to her, and there's, hey, let's be friends and let's hang out. And then her ex shows up and he pretends to be dating her so that her ex will stay away because he suddenly wants her back. So then a whole romance ensues between them. And then before you know it, they realize that their fake dating might not be the fake dating that they thought it was. From there, I went into the Flameborn books. This is, the first book was Flameborn Chosen, and this one is Flameborn Fury. Book 3 came out. I just haven't read it yet. This book is about a girl. She's the first Flameborn chosen by a dragon that the world has ever seen. So she's the first female dragon rider, and she has bonded with a young female dragon. And so it's all about her learning to live in this world of men in a area where it's all been about the men, trying to find her own strength, trying to find her own way to do things. Kind of reminds me of Violet from Fourth Wing in the sense that Violet had to learn to do things differently because she was weaker due to her sickness. In this case, for her, she's just a female, and everything has been built for men and the strength of men. So she's trying to learn to be different. And then you've got the general who is in charge of all of the Flameborns. And so he's trying to help her fit into this world and make sure that she gets all the same advantages as the other men, and just trying to help find a new dynamic for everybody in this situation. I read the Book of Azrael. This is book 1 in the Gods and Monsters series. And I also read book 2, which is The Throne of Broken Gods. Very, very good book. You've got this girl who basically her sister was going to die. So she makes a bargain with an evil god to save her sister. And so now she is bound to this evil god to do all of his evil deeds. Amongst all of this, a god is woken up, and he's kind of like they call him the world ender. So, but he comes down to figure out what's going on because some of his people are dying. And the two of them meet, and they end up crossing swords. And he's like, tell you what, you help me, I'll help you. And well, she actually says it first. She's like, hey, you need to find this Book of Azrael. I'll help you find it. And he's like, well, what do you get in return? She's like, you'll protect my sister. You'll keep her safe. So basically she binds herself to him in order to keep her sister safe. And then so her and this god go, Samkiel, go on this mission, find the Book of Azrael before the evil god can get a hold of it. And so there's this whole mission and whole dynamic, and the two of them together, and they're learning each other, and she's helping him and he's helping her. And it's just... Then we have the Wolf King, and this one where you have a princess who's getting ready to marry a sleazeball, and then ends up getting kidnapped by a wolf shifter, and he takes her back to his kingdom. He also has to keep her safe because the wolf shifters and the humans have been in war for a really long time, and so the wolves don't really like the humans, so she has to be under his protection in order for her to stay safe. But even then, she's only so safe. And so this book is all about her learning about the world around her and finding out that things weren't really what she was taught for them to be. And then this whole romance ensues between her and this wolf shifter. Then we have Snowkissed, and this one was cute. This is all about a single mom who has a child who is has Down syndrome, and then she meets this guy who is in town watching his niece, and right around Christmas time, and she ends up needing a date for her ex-husband's sister. He offers to be her date if she will help him make the best Christmas that imaginable for his niece. And so the whole romance ensues between the two of them, and then you have his niece and you have her daughter, and it was just very cute. Windweaver. This one is all about, you've got these fae, and they have these powers. You've got the one that can wield water, one can wield fire, another one can wield earth, and the other one can wield air. And she ends up being the Windweaver, where she didn't know she was until this evil general whose unit was about ready to kill her shows up, kills his entire unit, and then kidnaps her and takes her away to the Fae realm. And then she learns all of this information. She learns that she's actually the air wielder, and she's one of 4, and they call them one of 4 And there's this whole prophecy that the four of them are going to come together and they're going to save the world because the world is dying. The four remnants have to come together and only then can the world be saved. So she's the air remnant. And then so she goes on this big old journey. She's finding out what it means to be the air remnant. She's training, but her powers are so big and uncontrollable, and she's worried about hurting the people around her. And so it's almost killed her a few times. So she's trying to learn how to handle this magic without killing herself and the people around her. Next book was The Snow Bride by Debbie Macomber. And this one was just basically about a girl who wants to get to know a guy that she had been seeing on the internet, never met him in person. And so she quits her job, move with this guy over in Alaska, having never met him. Like she lands at the airport. The guy that she's supposed to meet isn't there. She ends up charting a little plane. This guy is like, okay, I can take you where you need to go. Just get in my plane. So as they're talking, she tells him about this guy that she met, and she tells him his name, and he instantly knows the guy, and he knows that he's bad news, and he's burned his sister. He tries to warn her, tries to tell him that he's a bad guy, that he's a con artist, that he's a catfisher. And she doesn't want to believe him. She doesn't know this guy. Why take his word when she's been talking to this guy for years on the internet, right? Because he doesn't want her to get hurt and he's worried about her. He decides to kidnap her in the plane, and he takes her to his home where only, it's like a population of 5 people and only one of them's a female. So then they get stuck in a snowstorm before he can take her back. And he's like, yeah, maybe kidnapping you wasn't the best option. I was just trying to do the right thing. And so romance ends up ensuing between the two of them. Riftborn. And Riftborn is basically, you've got this girl from another kingdom where the kingdom was destroyed by the kingdom she's in now. And they took some of the children and they marked them, and they decided to keep them for whatever reason, maybe spoils of war, I don't know. But they decided to keep them, which is interesting because the kingdom doesn't like them because these kids represent the loved ones that they lost in the war. She ends up with this power that she's been keeping hidden because it's very dangerous and it could kill people. During a party, she almost kills 2 people, and this general witnesses her using her powers, and he pretty much says, hey, join my special elite unit to fight this secret evil that's infecting our land, or die. It's your choice. At first she was going to run away, but then she realized that she needs to learn to control this power, and he might just be the key to help her to do that. Fate Inked in Blood, which was book 1. This is the Saga of the Unfated. And then this is book 2, A Curse Carved in Bone. And these are by Danielle L. Jensen. She was married to a sleaze bucket who basically turns her over to this Jarl so that he can annul their marriage, which ends up being the case. She ends up using her secret power. She ends up was called the Shield Maiden. And there's this prophecy that whoever controls the fate of the Shield Maiden will unite the kingdoms and become king. So this Jarl wants her so that he can become king of the world, basically, of the whole realm. He tasks his son, Bjorn, to protect her. Other people were going to want to try to take her and be controlled, to control her fate and become king, or they want to kill her so that that Jarl can't become king. And all the while, the son is helping train her to fight. She's also has these tasks, these trials that the gods keep giving her that she has to complete. Hello, editor me here. So as I was doing all of my work, I realized I forgot to talk to you guys about the audiobooks and the books that I read on Kindle. I just talked all about my physical books, which wouldn't be all 99 books. I read Mission Clockwork, and basically this is almost like a Quasimodo type story. MMC, his name's actually Modo, right? From Quasimodo. So he has a deformity, but he also has this ability to shapeshift himself to look like anybody he wants for a certain amount of time. And he gets trained by this guy who wants to use him for his own purposes as he raises him from a kid. And then when he reaches a certain age, he just throws him out in the middle of London to basically survive by himself. This is your test. I've, given you fight training and knowledge training, and now can you survive? So then how he chooses to survive is basically jumping from rooftop to rooftop around the city, contracting himself out to people to solve things for them. Like, say someone lost their wallet and needs to try to find it. someone lost a piece of jewelry that was very important to his wife or something like that, then they would go hire Moto, who would then go and find the item for them and then get paid for it. And now granted, because he looks the way he does, he never actually would meet people in person. He had his own little apartment. And so then people would just come talk to him through the door, and then they had their own system for payments and stuff like that. It kind of gives me Nancy Drew vibes. That's like the only thing I can think of, or Sherlock Holmes vibes, right? Because it seems like each book has a mystery that needs to be solved, and they're each going to be different mysteries, but there's also this core group that are like the main bad guys that are causing all this mischief. There's also A Fate Forged in Fire. Now, I read the physical copy for this book, but I realized it was a book that I forgot to talk about. And so this book is all about a girl who family was basically killed off because the rulers wanted to keep ruling and they didn't want any claims to the throne. And there was, so like anytime that certain girls were born, they were killed off. And so she was put into hiding for a long time, waiting for her chance to get to take the title to her throne. How her plan was to do that was to bond with a dragon, and there's only a few dragons left in the whole country. Her best chance was to wait for the king to die so that she could bond with the dragon. She ends up in the castle, not necessarily as queen, because the king's son ends up basically taking the throne, and they tie her to a marriage to one of the princes, everything to fall in line, and so she couldn't get the throne or whatever. And then she's got this other guy who he's supposed to be helping get her on the throne, who wants to start this big war. I mean, this one's hard to explain without giving a ton of things away. She wants to take the throne, wars, they're on the verge of war, and then you got the MMC, who is the prince that she's ended up married to. And so there's this back and forth between them, and all of these things that like bring them together and then like tear them back apart. And it's just like back and forth ping pong. Okay, and then I read Stone Father. This was a very short book. It's basically just about this boy who was abused a lot as a kid. And so he runs away, goes to this town. And in this world, you have these people with abilities to manipulate water and rocks and, different things like that. And so the city that he's living in is like the city of water. And apparently it used to belong to the earth people, but like a war happened a long time ago, and the earth people were pretty much wiped out or pushed out. And so now the only earth people that are allowed in the city are ones that are specifically approved to be in there. And even then, the only amount of earth magic they're allowed to use when they're asked to like repair a road or something like that. And then they're heavily supervised and if for any reason they're found using their abilities beyond what they're asked to do, they get, and as the boy's there and he's working under somebody because obviously he ran away, so he had no money, no place to live, nowhere to go. He ends up working under one of these earth users, and then while he's there, he learns that he is also an earth user, and he's a very powerful earth user. Then I listened to Battle World on audiobook. Battle World was all about, like, you have all of these different planets, and you have these aliens that have come in and they've conquered these planets, and then they've pretty much enslaved all of the people, and then they take people from different planets and they send them to one planet, which is called Battle World. They get synchronized with these like little alien species that get drilled into their bodies and synchronized with their bodies, and they're kind of like sentient beings. And so then it kind of turns them into like little computers. So like what you would actually see on a video game, right? So once he gets synced with a sentient, he then gets put in with a group of people, and then they have to go out on missions. They have to complete missions, and they level up, and then like these little computer screens will like can appear up, and it'll tell you what your skills are, what your class is, the stats of all of your weapons. You have items that are stored in these boxes, and you can like click on them and get an item and drink the item. And so this is just the story about this group and a couple other groups that are just going out and they're trying to survive. Then I listened to Undone. Undone is about this Jen girl who was ordered to do something that she didn't do, and she gets punished and she gets sent down to Earth as a human, and she manages to keep a small fragment of her power, because if she wouldn't have, it would have killed her. She does that is by basically drinking blood from these like demi-humans. So they're not Jen, but they're not human either. They're like demi-Gen, and they're kind of like on Earth doing their own thing, because they're half-breeds, so the Jinn don't really mess with them because they're impure, so they just like leave them alone. And so they kind of walk around Earth and they help Earth using their powers. Again, like fire, people can, some of them can manipulate fire, some of them can manipulate earth, wind, water, things like that. And so she finds this group of people. She ends up working for them and helping them. Basically, they're allowing her to feed off of them in order to survive. And as payment, she works with them. But she also gets paid real money too. That's nice. They're giving her a chance to, you know, have something to like live off of. So then she helps these people solve cases and things like that. Then on Kindle, I read His Majesty's Dragon. Now this one had like no romance whatsoever involved in it. And it's basically about this guy Lawrence, who was a naval captain, and while he was out at sea battling, because this takes place in the Napoleon Wars, he takes over this enemy ship and he notices that there is a dragon egg in there. Now, this particular story, they don't have an air force as in like planes. Their air force are dragons, and then the dragons get these like things, these baskets strapped to them, and then people sit in there and then they like throw bombs out and stuff like that. So that's kind of like their air force. They're way, way out to sea. By the time they start getting back towards land, the egg hatches in the middle of the ocean, and the dragon, Tamaray, ends up picking Lawrence. And then the way that the law states, like if you bond with the dragon, that's it. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, it doesn't matter. You leave where you're at and you join the basically Dragon Air Force. Like the bond between him and his dragon Tamaray is just so beautiful. They're like the best of friends, and it's just so heartwarming to see. I definitely feel vibes like what you get from Aragon and Sephora. So the last book I read on Kindle was Furies of Cauldron, and in this one you have a couple different characters. This kind of reminded me of the Throne of Glass series in a way, because you have several different POVs, and each one of them, although separated, they come together sometimes, but they have their own pivotal importance that kind of makes the whole story. The difference between the Throne of Glass and the Furies of Cauldron is the fact that in Throne of Glass, you still kind of had a FMC, even though it went into the POVs of other people. In book 1 of Furies of Cauldron, because it is a series and I've only read book 1, you have no idea who the main character is. It doesn't really seem like there is a main character. It's just because it goes through several different people's POVs, including the bad guys. So you're not 100% sure exactly who is the main character, or if they even have a main character. But I definitely loved the story. You have this girl who went through this academy of magic, and she gets her first real mission after graduating, just for it to completely get blown up. A man betrays her. She ends up having to run away, manages to connect with the king to tell him that they've been betrayed, and he sends her off on another mission, which then connects her to another boy who never got magic, which is actually a very hard thing to do. You have these like furies, and they're how the people get their powers. It's like they connect with you, and that's how you get powers. Some people only get one fury, some people get connected with a couple furies. This poor kid is like 19 and he's never bonded with a fury, and so, you know, that's definitely caused some issues, especially considering how his aunt and uncle both have furies. His parents died when he was young. He doesn't really know them. He was raised by his aunt and his uncle on a farm. Uncle is like in charge of one town. He's like the leader of this town, and it's his job to keep it running and to protect everybody. A series of events happen with him and his family, and then she comes along. She ends up connecting with them, and then this whole thing ensues, and then they're trying to protect a city from a big war, and it's just, you think everybody's gonna die. And I definitely had Lord of the Ring vibes towards the end, as when you got this small village trying to survive this ginormous horde of enemies, and you just think there's no possible way that you can survive. Like, everybody's gonna die, and like everybody's getting hurt, and you're like, okay, that's the end. Like, I don't know why there's more books in this series, but later, goodbye, it was nice knowing you, right? Like, you think that like everybody's gonna die, and then just somehow it works out. But it definitely gave me Lord of the Ring vibes in that sense. That is all 99 books that I read in 2025. I know it was an absolutely long video. I did not keep any timers for 90 seconds, but hopefully I did a good job on keeping them under 90 seconds, and this video is going to be a million years long. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what some of your reads were for 2025, and if you had any surprises or anything like that, and if you've read any of these books. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.